Hello.
Hello. Sorry, Jim.
Yeah,
The select board ran over and I could not open this meeting without that one closing.
okay. All right, well, thanks. I think we have everybody, the whole finance committee is here, so we can call the finance committee meeting to order. I see a bunch of people, I'm not so sure. It looks like we've got both Merrill and the recycling team on, as well as Miriam and Conservation Committee or the Conservation Commission.
Yeah.
So maybe to manage time as well as we can for everybody, we can start with one of those two, either with Miriam or Merrill, if you guys want to.
Hi, could we, I wonder if we could go first, just because I've got our land use clerk here taking minutes for us. If I have a quorum, we were going to convene, but I only see one other commissioner. So Mary David is here and Janice is not on the commission, but she's here on, so people may have had troubles getting in. So would that be okay if we went first?
Yeah, how much? No, Merrill.
No, it's okay. I would prefer to go first as well, but hey,
Okay, how much time do you think you'll have, Miriam, on your topic?
Hopefully very, very short.
Okay, let's kick it off. Let's get it going.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, I did send to the finance committee what you've put together so far. So we have a little bit of background.
Yes. So I don't know if you have questions for us. We are in a situation where we need to hire a consultant or consultants to assist us. And we don't have funding in our own accounts that we can use for this purpose. We have a couple of accounts that are based on fees, but the one that has the biggest chunk of money comes from our Wetlands Protection Act fees, which we cannot use for anything related to the local bylaw. So we have limited funds available for this particular purpose.
Okay, and you said there's a $5,000 number out there. Is that something that's been determined that would be the consultant's fee?
That's what we are anticipating, with the understanding that we have a small amount of money. We have about $2,500 in another account that we can access. So if there's an overage, we would go to this other account that we can use.
Okay, maybe if you could just give us all a little bit more background on just what this
Sure.
consultant, the objective for the consultant.
Yeah, so
Sure.
it's an important issue. So we have a local wetlands bylaw. And during as you may know, the Conservation Commission has been reviewing ANRADs for the proposed solar projects that are coming before Shutesbury. And eventually these projects, if they go forward, would come back to the Conservation Commission for wetlands permits, notices of intent. And during one of the public hearings recently, it became known to us, really raised by some residents, that there is some language in our local bylaw that the Conservation Commission has not been very mindful about and has never defined or promulgated any regulations for. That has to do with the regulation or protection of subsurface streams, not wetlands per se, but a different kind of subsurface hydrology. And so we had a consultation with town council about this, and she urged us to hire consultants and get some scientific guidance as well as some regulatory language drafted so that we can revise our regulations and give guidance to the solar applicants about how they need to investigate their properties if they're going to go forward with these applications. So there's this area of our bylaw that's not defined. We don't need to change the bylaw. What we need to do is change the regulatory language. We have the authority to pass regulations, but we really need expert scientific guidance that is beyond our scope within our own knowledge base. And, you know, we need to make sure that it's done thoughtfully and correctly so that it will pass muster. And so we've been doing some research and talking to some different experts and are developing a scope for hiring consultants that would do this research and then testify, then draft language, and then testify in public hearings to help us promulgate the regulations.
I see one hand up. Susie?
In the letter that we got, the email, it said that other communities have regulations and that Shutesbury was alone in not having that. What about using the language that other communities have already figured out?
We are the only town or community in all of Massachusetts that has this particular language. So there are no regulations in existence for this particular resource area. And we have looked at, there's no other community that has this particular language.
So you're not looking to draft something that other communities have already used to deal with subsurface streams?
No, because nobody else has that language in their local bylaw, and the Wetlands Protection Act is silent about it. So it's a unique area in our particular bylaw. Sorry, I'm looking dark here. So that doesn't help us. We certainly have looked carefully at other bylaws and regulations, and nobody else has this language.
I see Bob with his hand. You're on mute, Bob.
He can't get off mute or something.
Okay, well, Bob is trying to figure that out. Anybody else with questions for Miriam or Conservation Commission? Jim?
So this situation is unique to Shutesbury. Why is this, why have we jumped into this arena when none of the other local towns seem to have the same problem that we're having right now with this? I don't understand why we have to address something that seems to be the only we seem to be the only town in the state that has to deal with this. I'm very confused.
Well, this bylaw was passed like 35 years ago or 30 years ago. No, it was more like 35 years ago. It was passed in 87. And this
35.
language hasn't, thank you, 30, whatever it was. So it hasn't changed. We've had this language in our bylaw. What's happened is in 35 years, nobody's actually read it carefully and thought about it until this particular situation emerged with the public hearing for the Montague, Carver, and Rad, where a group of residents came forward having read the bylaw and raised it as an issue. And we all kind of sat back on our heels and went, that's interesting. And, as we have explored it, we've learned that nobody else has this particular language. It's what the town voted on and what the Conservation Commission promoted 30 plus years ago.
I see Bob and then Becky.
Yeah, I found the mute. It was disappeared for a while, but thank you. I just wanted to ask for clarification. Are you requesting this money be transferred from our reserve, or are you requesting to be put in our budget?
I think we're requesting a transfer. what
Right.
it sounded like.
So it's for this fiscal year, for fiscal year.
I would like to start this fiscal year, but it's going to bridge over. We're not going to complete it by the end of this fiscal year. So we would like to get started as quickly as possible. So a portion of it would get used for this fiscal year and then some of it for the following. I'm not sure how to divide that up. I don't think it matters a whole lot. But some of the work would be done this fiscal year.
Okay, and the only other question I have is, if we're the only town in the state that has this language or this concern for what are they, subterranean water streams, or is that what it is?
It says subsurface
Have you
stream.
considered dropping it from our bylaw? Is that an option, or?
No, we haven't, because we think that it is possible to establish regulations. And the whole point of bylaws is that local bylaws are generally more restrictive and more protective than the state laws. And we think that we can develop regulations that will be appropriate for this resource area.
Okay,
We want to make
Becky?
sure that we do it right.
yeah. Becky,
Miriam, I have two questions. Sorry. The first is, do you have an estimate? Sorry. Why don't you go on till I stop coughing?
I think what I interpreted the question is there, do you already have some estimates from consultants or whatever, and what this is?
We
what
have
this will-
a estimate from one pair of consultants that would be about $5,000.
Okay,
About 22 hours at, I don't know what it was, $225 an hour roughly.
yeah. So this, go ahead, Becky.
And my second question is will this impact resource areas all over town, like on each parcel, any place? It's not just going to impact the project that ANRAD is focusing on.
Well-
It will impact townwide, won't it?
Well, what we would want to do, and this is where we need expert guidance, is we would want to develop regulations that were scaled appropriately, so that small projects that we don't think would have a cumulative impact would not be subject to the same scrutiny as large scale projects involving multiple acres. So we're pretty confident we could develop regulations that would not jam up homeowners and requiring them to hire a hydrogeologist, for example. We don't think that's appropriate. But again, we need to know what is the threshold that should trigger a more intensive investigation. And we don't want to just pull that out of a hat. We want it based on, some sort of defensible science.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I see Les's hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. I worked for the state for 25 years or so and really worked with DEP a lot, reviewed a whole lot of projects statewide from the Cape to the Berkshires, and the DEP wetlands regulations are minimal protection, really. They may be more progressive than other states have, but they really do not address this really important issue that is actually in our bylaw of subsurface water impacts and how that affects subsequent or adjacent properties. Project comes in. Usually they're of some size. And I applaud the efforts of the Conservation Commission. I'm glad we have something that we're addressing that nobody else in the state does, because it's an important environmental aspect of reviewing projects. And if somebody builds, what are going to be the impacts on that? So I strongly endorse the request from the Conservation Commission to look into this and make sure that it is implemented correctly and with science, and protects not only small owners, but protects small owners from large projects. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, George, and then Susie. What happened to George?
He's right. He's struggling with that.
All right, well, while George is sorting that out, maybe Susie?
If this bylaw gets, I don't understand why the language isn't amended, isn't the word amended, but if all bylaws are reviewed by the AGO's office, does this expose us to law? Because it's new law, will that expose us to lawsuits?
I think that we are exposed to lawsuits whether we do something or we don't do something. So I don't think that one way or another that should be driving our thought process. We need to do what we think is appropriate. And as long as we are thorough and thoughtful, basing whatever decisions we make on some solid science, I think we can stand by our decision making. The bylaw is legal. It was approved by the AGO. As far as I'm aware, we've had that bylaw for many years. There's nothing in it that would be illegal or invalid. Towns are allowed to have more restrictive wetlands protection bylaws. There's nothing in state law that precludes towns from having more restrictive bylaws. And in fact, there's something like 150 towns and cities in Massachusetts that do have more restrictive local bylaws.
George, are you plugged in? No, that was mute, or no? Okay, let's see, Janice.
Hi, I have to figure out how to turn off my hand. I'll do that in a minute. Yeah, so I just wanted to reinforce this bylaw was approved at annual town meeting, May 2nd, 1987, and then it was approved by the AG's office at that time and went into effect. So it's nothing new. It's been there since then, but we never really acted on it. And it's really people that were looking very carefully at the DEP wetlands protection and our bylaw, you know, concerned about some projects coming into town that really dug into this and then came to us and said, well, why aren't you, you know, protecting, as you said in this bylaw here, why aren't you talking about and asking for verification or confirmation that there is no impact to this resource?
Yeah, I just have a question, I guess. Maybe it's a question somebody asked earlier, but I wasn't really clear on the answer. And that is, no other town has language that addresses the concern that we have here with this?
No.
We're in a very unique situation. And what makes us that unique versus the rest of the
Always-
state?
Always
We're-
cooler.
Okay. Yeah, because I just try to think, you know, when we're finance committee and we're looking to manage our costs, and it just seems that something in this area, there should be some language that somewhere in these whatever number of towns has some kind of language out there that would address what our concern is.
Well, there isn't. In other towns, there's scientific literature out there, and the consultants we've talked to that they feel confident that they can help us come up with definitions and performance standards that we can use to set a policy. But I think that it's a unique situation that we find ourselves in where we have a strong protective local bylaw. And for the first time in our history as a community, we're now looking at some very large projects that could have cumulative impacts. Other communities may have different language in their bylaws, but they also may have more of a track record in looking at industrial development or commercial development. Shutesbury doesn't have that track record. So we're forging a new path here.
Yeah, there are other towns that don't have commercial or industrial activity like us.
Right. I'm saying there's a combination of our bylaw being, having the language that it has, and the fact that now we're looking at larger projects that we have not had a track record of in our community. And people are scrutinizing the bylaw and have raised this as an issue, and it is a legitimate issue. We can't have a bylaw without a way of defining what that bylaw means and making it clear to applicants how they would meet the standards of the bylaw. So, anybody who wants to do development in Shutesbury, whether it's a house or a large commercial project, they need to have some clarity about how the bylaw would impact their property and their project. So we have an obligation to provide that clarity to them. We can't do it without getting some expert guidance. So we're trying to address the need of applicants to have that kind of clarity and also have a path for ourselves to understand how we could issue permits. We can't wait until an application comes to us. Applicants have a right to know in advance, what is the Conservation Commission going to require of me? Well, we don't know what we're going to require of them. We need some help. And so we're doing this to protect the town. We're also doing this with an understanding that we have this obligation to applicants.
Okay, we've got Les again. Or are you on there from before? Okay, and you're on mute.
It's a new hand.
Okay.
Thank you. From a finance committee point of view, and maybe to address what Susie was raising, what you're raising, Jim, there's going to be a challenge with some of these large projects coming up one way or another. And it seems to me to make sense to protect the town, to ask for the kind of funding and resources and expertise that Miriam is asking for. I think the bottom line is this is something that the town needs to do here, given the projects that are on the near horizon. Thanks.
All right. AJ and Susie.
Okay, so just one more question to sort of help clarify what this kind of unique set of circumstances is. So forgive me if it feels like you've been asked the same question multiple times, but I think it's just taking a little while for us to develop the understanding here. So can you just confirm for me, is the unique factor here that other communities wetlands protection bylaws do not speak to the specific issue of these subsurface streams? Is that the unique characteristic here?
That's a unique characteristic that
Right.
the methods for defining protected resource areas for does not deal with subsurface hydrology, subsurface water flow. And in our bylaw, there is protection, and yet we have to define what we mean by that and what an impact would be. So obviously a small development project we wouldn't think would have a significant impact, but we're talking about 25 acres or 100 acres, well, then maybe it does, but we need to know how to define that.
Got it. And is there any insight you've developed about sort of how this language came to exist? Like, because it doesn't sound like there were models for this in other bylaws. And so I'm just curious, like, where this kind of came from. Was there a particular person that?
Yeah, it came from a person who's present at this meeting tonight.
Okay.
Not to throw her under the bus. She can identify herself if she wants to, but I think that there was an initial thinking, if I'm paraphrasing, that this language was going to refer to intermittent streams where water flow is sometimes above surface and sometimes below surface. But we need to define that, and we need to figure out how would we measure that so that an applicant knows how to delineate it in their application. And we can't just leave this up to be to guesswork.
Right. So as it exists right now, it's too vague in terms of being able to give kind of precise guidance to applicants.
typically what's true with bylaws, and it's true for the Wetlands Protection Act, that the language is vague and the regulations are very specific. So the Wetlands Protection Act has very, very specific regulations. And generally, most towns have very specific regulations for their bylaws. Our town regulations are pretty out of date. They were passed in around 2000. And back then, bylaws were not very detailed and people really hadn't evolved in their thinking about what regulations local communities should have. If you look at Amherst's wetlands ordinance, it's 37 pages long of regulations. If you look at Belchertown's, it's 35 pages long. If you look at North Adams, it's 35 pages long. So most towns with bylaws over time have evolved with their regulations. And I think we're due for an upgrade with our regulations to bring our bylaw practice in line with what is standard across the state. But this particular language, we need a section in our regulations that we need help with.
Thank you.
Susie,
Has the CONSCOM consulted with the AGO's office about the latitude for change that they would have without calling it an amendment, which would have to go to them?
No. But I'm not aware that developing definitions or performance standards is inconsistent. Most regulations have definitions and performance standards. So I think we're in pretty safe territory in providing definitions. Our regulations currently have a section for definitions. So we would be expanding on those definitions. All we're doing is we would be defining a resource area that's already in the bylaw.
okay, Don, and then Janice.
I just wanted to reiterate something that Miriam brought up. The FinCom needs to understand something here. This is probably a very short-term, one-time cost to develop methods which are commonly in practice for determining the size of underground watersheds. And if you don't approve this and fund this right now, and I mean right now, you're going to end up with a lot of trouble on your hands when you can't process the rest of the ANRADs. It's going to blow up in your face. And we're going to end up being not only challenged, but most likely sued by residents who feel their drinking water is being somehow diminished, the quality of it. And, there's a kernel of truth in that. This is a cautionary process. And I think that the Conservation Commission really doesn't need to justify not being willing to go to town meeting and change the bylaw so that it eases a restriction. The CONCOM's responsibility is to the members of town who feel their resource is being threatened. And this is a non-committal kind of middle of the road way of doing it that allows the ANRADs to continue to be processed, doesn't hold up the process, and allows anyone submitting NOIs of this size or projects of this size to simply adhere to what the methods are. And they're not expensive methods. We're not creating something like what the AG's office would be concerned about here, making a more restrictive practice. This is really definitive in that it's pretty common practice. We're just late to the game as to developing regulations for it.
Okay, thanks. Janice?
Yes, so I just wanted to say that I was the chair of the Conservation Commission in the late 80s and the one who wrote the bylaw. And so it may be a matter of the way in which I punctuated the sentence. I only wrote in what I intended was there are streams in Shutesbury that are above ground and then briefly go below ground and then come back up again. I've seen them on Carver Road. That's what I was thinking of when I wrote this. It went through all of our process and was approved all the way around, but really didn't become a focus until now. But the MACC, the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions, that's the support group for conservation commissions, expects towns to personalize the bylaw to meet their specific vegetation, wetlands, whatever types. And that's what I was doing in this case, is that I knew there were these streams in town that did go underground and came back up again. And that's what was meant. But like I said, perhaps with the incorrect punctuation or something, it sounds worse than it is. And we really need to get this straightened out at this point. Like Don was saying, it's going to blow up on us if we don't get a third-party professional person or persons to look this over and to set up the regulations. I don't think it requires changing the bylaw. It's just writing the regulations to include the definitions and the protocols necessary to show that you're not altering the underground stream flow.
But Janice, we're the only town in the state that has this kind of a situation with the underground water.
No, I would think that probably Pelham does, probably Wendell. I'm sure there are other towns that do that, just
Yeah.
for one reason or another, didn't put it into their bylaw when they were writing it. Some of them don't have bylaws, wetland bylaws. Those that do, they just, I guess, didn't think of it or didn't, I don't know. This is back in 1987. It was a long time ago.
I'm just trying, from a perspective of this, there's
Yeah.
no other town that either no towns have underground water like we have, or they don't have, there's no language. No town has language in their
Not that we're aware of.
bylaws that
We haven't been able to
address
find any
this.
others. No, I just wrote it to
Yeah.
reflect what I knew was happening in town.
Mary David?
Yes, so I just want to also reiterate, I'm on the Conservation Committee too. Other towns that don't have bylaws now, as these projects come up, may indeed be challenged with the same thing that we are actually being challenged with right now, to be able to define this. And also, I think it went by really quick when Miriam said it, but as we've been involved with this, we've involved town council, and they also have strongly recommended that we go forward with this process to be able to deal with these issues as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary, do you want to reply to that, or because Susie has her hand up?
I just want to say that from being a town clerk and submitting bylaws to the AGO's office, this seems very much like it's going to have to go in front of the AGO's office, because you're changing something, you're adding to it or whatever. It will have, I believe it'll have to be reviewed. The AGO's office also has a lot of files full of other bylaws that have been approved. So that would be a place to research what language is out there that other communities have used. And I just don't know if people on the CONSCOM are familiar enough with the process to be predicting what they really are headed into. And again, I believe there's language out there that could be copy and pasted for covering subterranean stream or subsurface streams.
Miriam?
Couple things I want to say. The Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions, which is a professional organization that provides consultation resources to commissions, keeps a database of all of the wetlands bylaws in Massachusetts and what resource areas are protected by them. None of them have this particular resource area. I've spoken with a past president of the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissioners, who's confirmed to me that in his experience in 30 years, 40 years of professional experience, he's unaware of any local community. We can't cut and paste unless we have scientific guidance in doing so. If we don't feel if we feel it's beyond the scope of our expertise, including our consultants, and we've spoken with Janice Stone, who is a wetland scientist who's been consulting with us. I've had conversations with Emily Stockman, who is our third-party reviewer for the solar projects. She also is unaware of any community that has this kind of regulatory language. Then we absolutely need professional guidance. Our town council advised us that we need to do this with all post haste, and that we need to start immediately on working on this. She did not see there being any legal barrier to us promulgating regulations that include definitions. She didn't think this was incompatible with state law, and she didn't think the Attorney General's office would have an issue with it. We certainly can bring this back to Donna and ask her to research that, but that's the legal advice we've been given. I spoke with Donna again yesterday, and she again urged us to move forward with this quickly. So there is a sense of urgency here. It's not just coming from the commission, it's also coming from town council and from the residents who've raised it as an issue. So we are trying to be responsive, and it would be, I think, a mistake for us to cut and paste. I don't think that's an appropriate regulatory approach.
Okay, we've got a pretty busy agenda tonight, so we're running out of time. Maybe if we can cut off discussion now and maybe just limit to finance committee. If there's any final comments from the finance committee before we move forward. Bob?
Are we gonna vote on this, or are we gonna put this on the shelf and then vote, discuss it further and vote on it? What's the feeling of the committee?
I think we should vote now. We've gone through the discussion.
I think so. I'll make a motion that we approve the $5,000 transfer for per the request to the Concom.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion from the finance committee? Okay, if we could go ahead and vote.
Arvanitis, aye.
Chartier, aye.
Groves, aye.
Stingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, no.
Walton abstain. Okay, that was
That's
short.
5-1-1, yeah.
That was short. Sorry, Meryl. That was, thanks for hanging in there. If we can get into your topic.
Thank
Ours
you.
really is short, actually.
Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Yeah, Miriam, thanks for preparing and bringing your team and sharing all this information.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Jim, is this 5,000 coming out of FinCom reserves?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Can you hear me now?
What's that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, now we can.
Okay. I
I heard you say aye too.
Oh, okay, yeah. I asked earlier, and nobody responded. Well, the only reason I asked is we can give her 5,000 now, but I think I heard that she wasn't necessarily going to spend it all this year. So would we be able to roll over any unspent funds into the next fiscal year? Okay,
We need to, all earmark it.
okay, yeah, that's what we need to do. Okay.
Okay, Meryl.
Okay,
And Gary, you guys are, it's all yours.
yes,
We're
and Peg
ready.
Ross is also here from the recycling committee. Hi, Peg.
I'm sorry. Oh,
yes.
Pam, okay. Hi.
Yes, I'm going to give you a quick overview of our solid waste and recycling. We did a request for proposal. We did an extensive outreach for the request for proposal. We ended up with two bidders, Casella and USA Waste and Recycling. And in addition, I'm just going to give you an overview quickly, and then if you have questions, you can ask after. In addition to our RFP for the trash hauling, we added an amendment to request pricing for trash disposal for this fiscal year. Our current disposal site, CEP, basically is going bankrupt. And as of April 15th, they are selling their business. This is what we've been told. It sounds like USA Waste and Recycling, who is actually our current hauler, will be buying that facility. But in the meantime, as of the 15th, we have no place to take our trash that's hauled. So if anyone wants to volunteer their yard, I would appreciate that, but otherwise, we need a site, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So when we went through the proposal for recycling and solid waste, we separated out the technical proposals from the price proposals. We got submissions for the technical proposals. We opened those first. We looked at necessary forms for insurance, tax compliance, etc. And both USA Waste and Casella met the basic minimum requirements, submission requirements. Casella proposed a pay-as-you-throw bag program at the curb, which is what we have now, a manual collection system, the same as what we have. They propose using one truck and doing the collection over a 2-day period. USA, so that's different. It would be Tuesday and Wednesdays would be the collection days in towns. And if and when we get to that, they will be working with the town to decide on those routes, and we'll get that information out to people. USA Waste proposed using the large plastic toters with automatic collection at the curb. And they want to use 2 trucks and collect it in one day. And if you see in those big toters in Amherst, we have a lot of long driveways, a lot of steep hills, and a lot of constraints in getting those large toters to the curb for some households. So the Recycling and Solid Waste Committee talked about all this. We reviewed these proposals, just the technical ones, and we ranked them. And 5 of our members voted Casella #1, 1 member abstained, and 5 of them voted against USA Waste with 1 member abstaining. So clearly the committee wanted to go with Casella on the technical scope of services. We then opened the price proposals, and I'll say the 1 abstention was simply a new member of the committee who didn't feel comfortable voting at this time. We opened the price proposals, and to give you a little background, the current amount we're paying per year is $66,000 per year. When we did this bid 5 years ago, the other bidder, Republic, their bid for this same year was $131,600. So more than double what the original bidder bid. And that company is now out of business. The original bidder, they were bought out by USA Waste. USA had to assume the contract. We asked them to extend the bid for another year, and they refused to do so. They said they're losing money every day. So we knew before we even bid, we were going to be looking at much bigger numbers. So when we opened the price proposal, Casella, their price started at $125,952 for the first year, ending at $162,033 in year 5. So that comes out to about a 6.5% increase per year. We did that amendment also for the tipping fee, because we need a place to take our waste now. And that was bid at $90 a ton for 1 year, rising to $101 in year 5, which is about a 3% increase per year. And I'll just say there that our current rate is $83.25 per ton. The numbers we're hearing from USA Waste with other towns right now is $97 a ton. So this is their pricing is quite a bit higher. So USA Waste, their contract, which was the one that our technical proposal we didn't select, theirs starts at $161,772, which is, almost $40,000 higher than the one from Casella, and ends at $189,250 in year 5. So that's about a 4% increase per year. And they did propose $97 a ton for their tipping fee, ending at $117.90 after 5 years. So that's about a 5% increase per year. So Becky had spoken with the chair of the select board, who gave us an approval to start some preliminary negotiations with Casella. We're not the decision-making body, but we wanted to bring the best information we could to the Board of Selectmen. And Gary Bernhardt, myself, and Becky spoke with Casella as our #1 choice at that point. We wanted to clarify a few things in their contract. They were really more details about toters, et cetera. And then see if we could get them to reduce that 6.5% increase per year. We wanted to negotiate with them. So we met with them twice. We also had some questions about their fuel adjustment formula that they proposed, because we proposed one that's used by Mass DOT. They had a different one. So after the first negotiation, they came back with us with a 5% increase per year. And we still weren't satisfied. We wanted it to be lower because we just impressed upon them the constraints of Proposition 2.5, the tight budgets we have, et cetera. So we went back with them, and honestly, we didn't really have a whole lot to negotiate on, because that's the bid we wanted, because it kept what we had now. So I'm happy to report that we got them down to 4% annual increase. So we felt that was much more fair to the town. We thought it was in good faith working with them. So we made a recommendation to the select board that once we get this 4% amount in writing from Casella, and just clarify the question we still have on the fuel adjustment formula they're using, that we have the town administrator work with Casella to complete a contract. The select board felt strongly that they wanted the FinCom to be aware of this whole process and get any feedback you have before making a final decision. So they're going to vote on that next week. In the second item, which is the much more immediate need to complete a place to take our trash for this fiscal year from April to June 30th, they did vote to go with Casella. And I will say that if we stayed with USA Waste for disposal, it would add about $1,000 between now and the end of the fiscal year to take our trash there. That's the differential between what we would have paid. Casella's amount is less, so the differential will be about $491 approximately to the end of the year. So again, we made the recommendation to go with a separate immediate contract with Casella, and they did approve that and want us to move forward with that. So that's the story. And it was a scary process when we started, because we didn't think, we were hearing that everyone was using those toters, and we were going to have to implement a system what we were concerned would not work well for Shutesbury. And we were really thrilled to have Casella show interest. And they've been working in Irving and Gill for a few years and do the same kind of pay-as-you-throw at the curb that we do. And they had, the towns had very good things to say about this hauler. So that's the story. So if you have any questions, and Gary, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that's a good presentation. The one thing that I would add is that we had talked about other options when we started this process. Talked about the possibility of buying a truck and doing the hauling ourselves, and then just paying for the timing. It's impossible to do that with the time that we have to get something like that going before the beginning of the new fiscal year. But now, if we have this contract with Casella, we've got 5 years to think about, other things that we might want to do. This is about the best deal that anybody can get right now. We'd like to be paying less, of course, but I think this is really the best thing that we can get.
And it just highlights that we had an unbelievable deal for the past 5 years. So we saved the town a lot of money during that time.
Yeah.
And Becky did also do a little projection about what our negotiations will save over the 5 years. And that's basically $35,000. So that's helpful as well. Becky?
It's actually 36.
36.
All right.
It made the persistence that Gary and Meryl showed in negotiations was beautiful. They had to come back, and we had 2 rounds when it didn't go as well as we had thought the first time. So I really want to applaud their persistence and helping to save a significant amount of money over the next 5 years.
See, AJ and then Bob.
Yeah, I had one question and then just a couple things I was hoping you could just clarify for me for the purpose of notes from the meeting, minutes from the meeting. So one was, the question is can you confirm that the USA waste bid that you received did not include the cost of those trash, that specific type of trash can that you were saying would be required in that scenario?
Their
did
bid
include.
would have
It did
included.
include that. Okay,
Right.
got it.
Voters.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay, so it was about $40,000 higher with the inclusion of the trash can. Okay, got it. So the things I was hoping you could just confirm for me. One is just the spelling of Casella. Is that C-A-C-E-L-L-A? Did I get that?
CASELLA.
Okay, C-A-S-E-L-L. Okay, great, thanks. And then, so with the negotiation that the successful negotiation, which congratulations, that sounds like you did an excellent job. So the year one cost would be 125, and then where does it end?
125,952. 125,952. And we're waiting for Casella to send us the revised pricing sheet. But if
Okay,
you
got it.
just multiply it by 1.04, you'll be close for the next 4 years.
4 years. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Did you do that what is that for year 5? If you have that.
I haven't counted yet.
It
Okay.
was one,
Yeah.
yeah, 140 something. Sorry.
Yeah.
Less than where
I thought they said-
USA would start.
I
Yeah,
thought they said it was 162 after 5 years.
Right, with their first opening bid.
that was the opening bid.
That was at the 6.5% increase per year, but we're going at 4, so that's why it's
So
lower.
that's what we're waiting for them to send us the final version of
Got it.
their pricing.
Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, I just want to say, I really am happy. You did a great job. Congratulate you on getting this done. I know it's expensive, but hey, it's expensive, right? And we ended up with a pretty good service that people are going to like. And I do appreciate that you mentioned, Gary and Merrill, that you're going to look into the future and your discussions, because this issue is not going to get easier to solve going forward, and we got to look into different ways, creative ways maybe to deal with it, after this contract is expired. So thank you.
Welcome, thank you.
Thanks.
This, if for people who are curious, so the year 5 fee would be $147,346.
Yeah, that's all I was gonna say.
Yep.
Oh,
Okay, other questions? Now, are we looking for the finance committee to vote on supporting this proposal? Is that what we're looking for as an outcome here? Or,
I don't think you need to formally vote, but if you want to show a level of support, that would be great. And the select board was looking for some feedback. So if that's your feedback, I think that'd be great.
yeah, I just have another one. I sort of lost, so there's the 126,000 fee, and then you said there's a tipping fee?
So the hauling fee is the 125. That's bringing trash, collecting it in town and bringing it to a waste disposal site.
Yeah,
The tipping fee is you weigh the trash that's in the truck at a disposal location, and it's a certain amount per ton to dispose of it. And Casella actually has their own disposal facility. It's a transfer facility actually, but it's based in Holyoke, so it's actually closer than the one that USA Waste has. And I suspect that's part of the reason that we're getting a better deal, but not necessarily. They're just more competitive.
yeah, and I didn't quite catch the numbers when you first put them out there for the tipping fee.
So it's $90 per ton is what they are proposing.
And then
Both
it would
for
go
the
up by,
short-term one and in the longer hauling contract, starting at that. And then Casella is proposing about a 3% per year increase. So at the end of the 5 years, the number is 101.31. And then there's increments each year in between.
Are those tipping fees basically offset by the bag charges that town members pay, or no? It's
No.
time. No, it's not.
No.
Okay, got it. No, yeah. Okay.
The bag
So-
charges basically pay for the bags. And then
Yeah,
it's
right.
more.
And that's it. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
It's to encourage recycling. That's the main reason we do
Got
pay.
it. So it's just an incentive. Okay.
Bob, is your hand up again, or is that from
Oh,
before?
no, sorry.
All right. Susie,
I also want to thank the recycling committee for their work on getting the word out that by recycling, we lower our tipping fees. There's been an influx of new people into town, so it'd be a good time to put it out again, that that's a very specific cost that can be reduced. And people, I know that learning how to do it and doing it right has been the bane of a lot of people's existence, but the other piece is the encouragement and the knowing how far we've come in terms of getting the recycling up and the tipping fees down.
Yeah, and helping spread the word that we have a pretty dynamic recycling and waste committee webpage, and there's a little formula you can put in there. If you have a question on any material, whether it's recyclable, you just enter that item in there, pizza boxes,
Right.
and you'll find out if they're recyclable or not.
Right.
So
Right.
just encourage people to go there and make use of the resources we have there.
what are the, just to try to get a sense for the overall impact before and after, given our current situation, price-wise or cost-wise, versus this 4% per year growth and this tipping fee, what change are we going to see as a town? What's the overall impact?
I hope what we see is more recycling. Because that actually, the materials recovery facility in Springfield changed a few years ago, so that towns are now having to pay a processing fee for the recyclables. However, Shutesbury over the last several months has actually been making a small amount of money and has not had to pay that processing fee. So the more we recycle, the better we do. So what we're hoping is that when word gets out that the costs of hauling and disposal are rising significantly, that people will pay more attention to recycling. The town does pretty well throughout the state. We're between 35 and 40% recycling, 35 and 40% of the waste stream. So we do pretty well throughout the state compared to other municipalities, but we can do better.
But I thought that right now and under current circumstances, we were not getting any compensation recycling fee wise.
We're not getting a lot, but we're not paying $90.50 a ton either.
We're getting a little bit of money back to the town.
A little bit of money back.
It's very dependent on international markets for, the post-consumer recyclables, and they've been all over the place. China had their, what was the something sword thing where they shut down taking all of the paper and everything. So that really threw everything into craziness where no one knew where to take their recyclables. And the interim period now, there are companies in the state and federal government are putting out incentives to start more recycling business to take post-consumer products and use them. So as you see more of that, you will see higher prices paid for the recyclable materials, but it's waffling. We're in a transition period now, but it's getting better.
Yeah, and just thinking from a budgeting standpoint, we should be looking at what, roughly $60,000 plus increase for next year versus this year. Does that sound about right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the difference between what we're paying and what we were paying this past year. And as I said, if we had gone with Republic, if that were our only bid last time, we'd be paying less now. So we just got a ridiculously good deal for 5 years. It wasn't realistic. The company provided that went bankrupt. They couldn't sustain
No,
it at that
they
amount.
sold
So
out.
we
They sold-
benefited from that, from
Yeah.
their poor decision.
Yeah. Susie and then Bob.
Another way to look at this is the town voted an override to do trash pickup, however many years ago. And there could be a rationale that 2.5% per year should have been added on to what we thought we were going to pay. I don't have the headspace to do that now. It might be an interesting exercise to figure out where we were, where we should be, and the contracts along the way are, they have a lot of variables, how we get to that number. But the town, and we don't always enact all of the 2.5. So there's a lot of math that could be chased around, and maybe we could do that with the recycling committee, or one of us would volunteer to look at that. But the town chose to have its trash picked up, and it has some mechanism to help raise the amount that would cost, or it could to spend on it each year. So we could think of it that way a little bit.
Bob.
Yeah, just so I'm clear on this, if people improve their recycling, it's not going to save us any money this year, is it? I mean, because tipping fee, we're getting charged per ton, or we on a contract?
It'll save us money on the tipping fee.
We'll get a little
Not on
saving.
the
on
haul-
the tipping
not on the
fee.
hauling costs.
Right, but our contract for hauling will remain the same, and we'll get a little benefit from whatever return we might get on the recycled materials too. Thanks.
Bernie.
I just want to add one thing. The alternative to doing curbside pickup, I mean, there are some other things that we can look into, but the alternative that most municipalities in our area have done is a subscription service. Amherst, for example, each household has to buy its own trash hauling, and they also pay their portion of the disposal fee. So I have a friend at Amherst. I asked him, I said, how much do you pay for the pickup? They have USA, the subscription, $400 a year. And that's, because we have a municipal pickup program, people pay an awful lot less than that in taxes for the service.
Just out of curiosity, Gary, in those models, do all homeowners pay the same subscription fee, or is it somehow tied to how much?
Well,
you
they're
produce,
different. They're
or-
different companies. They're different companies that are doing that. There are at least 2 or 3 different companies that are doing subscriptions. Another way of doing it is to take it to the transfer station in Amherst. And you pay the fee for to get in, which is $125 a year right now, and then you pay by the bag of trash that you put in. So there aren't a whole lot of options for dealing with trash. The only way to really deal with this is zero waste.
To that, well, to the question of recycling, I don't know, Bernie or Merrill, or what's looking in your crystal ball, what's your sense? Or right now we don't get much compensation for recycle. What's your current gut feel for the future and how that may change or may not change?
Well, I think that recycling, one of the big problems is that recycling is a business. It's not something that the government does because the environment needs it. And so the stuff that doesn't get sold gets sent to a landfill or an incinerator or something like that. So what we really need, and it's beginning to happen in this state, what we really need are government incentives for entrepreneurs who want to use recyclables. And the more that happens, I think the more recycling will pay off for the environment. And I think for the towns.
Excuse me, could I just say something, Jim? I just wanted to let Peg and April know that the personnel board thing that we talked about at the meeting last night is not going to happen tonight here. Just so you're aware, I've been trying to get through to you and I couldn't.
Hope you enjoyed the show.
Okay, any other questions for recycling team?
Well, just what should we bring back to the select board? Do you want us to just, do you
Well,
want to?
can I make a motion that will, that we vote on?
Yep.
Vote on,
Okay.
vote on what?
So I'm gonna make a motion that the finance committee, I guess, endorse the recycling committee's recommendation to accept the bid from Casella.
I'd second that.
Governor, I decide.
So, yeah, it was any other, anyone else have something else to say? Not, are we good? We know everything we need to know. Our questions are asked, our comments are made. All right, Arvinitis.
Governor, I decide.
Groves Act.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye, and thank you.
Walton, aye. Thanks, Merrill, Peg, Bernie, for all the work you guys have been doing on this.
Thank
Nice
thank you
work.
guys for the support. We
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Really
Becky's
excellent.
been pretty
Thank
good
you.
about keeping us up to date on the a little bit on the gory details over the week, so we know
It
hasn't
was a
been.
little hairy, actually, so
It's not
we're
a-
Yeah, I
happy
got,
the way it worked out.
Yeah, yeah. We as a finance committee greatly appreciate your efforts.
I would say hairy but interesting.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. What's the old Chinese curse? May you live in interesting times.
Yeah,
Yes.
there you go.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank
All
you.
right.
All right, can we move to the minutes from our last meeting, from our March 22 meeting?
Yeah.
AJ sent them out earlier today.
Yep.
Anybody have anything to add, change? This,
I have minor things.
Yeah, please.
Number one, OPEB study review, item B. Is interest rate, I think that's discount rate is 4.25, not interest rate. So if you look at the report when he does present
yeah.
values, he uses a
So-
discount rate of 4.25.
All right, so that's 1B. You're
Yes.
saying that? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
replace
gotcha.
interest with a
Yep,
discount.
got it.
And then on 3, let me get
Yep.
down there and see what I'm talking about. I have a note here, 3, oh, the word gap. Right now we have a gap. I think that doesn't say if the gap is plus or minus. I was wondering if we could change that word to surplus. Because at that time, I think we had revenue in excess of expenses of 160.
Have a surplus.
Yeah. Yep, that makes sense.
That's all I had. Thank you. Nice job on the
Hey,
meeting.
Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, AJ,
Yeah.
why are all the votes in your little sheet here, police department, fire department? Weren't there 6 people voting and not just 5? I was just sort of
It's
surprised.
capital planning vote.
No, those are the capital planning
Oh, I
committee
see.
votes.
All
So,
right, all right.
so when we went through each of the requests, we shared the project, the cost, and what the capital planning committee's vote was.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I just had one possible item. It's under OPEB number 1, and it's D, section D. And it has to do with the comment fairly aggressive portfolio. And I remember those words being used, but at the time I thought he was thinking we were using a 6.8% rate of return. And then he looked again, he says, oh, wait a second, you're at 5.65. And I think he thought that was not so aggressive, but more in line with expectations or what he would expect. Becky,
The actual rate of return was 14 something. And so what is the 5.65 is what's on his actuarial report. So what they're building on is not, they're not using actual data, they're using an average.
yeah, this is for the course of the entire period, whatever period they're using.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I
think
understand that.
Yeah, but I think
understand
the
that.
14, it was the 14.4 that was being noted as aggressive.
Not 6.8?
He corrected himself. He had said 6.8 and then he corrected himself. No, I meant 5.65 because that's what he has in his report.
Yeah,
He said,
that's my point. And when he said 6.8, he says that's fairly aggressive. And then he says, oh, wait a second, you're at 5.65.
his report says 5.65, not 6.8. He corrected himself.
Right. So I guess my point is, should that really still say fairly aggressive, or should it say more like it's in line or more?
Well, what if it just says is invested in a portfolio that assumes anticipated return rate of 5.65%?
That's it.
Yeah, maybe that's that. Yeah. Yeah.
AJ, one small criticism, if I may. The same section, the OPEB section, top D, JH asked for more information on how Shutesbury's OPEB funds are invested. Should not have a question mark on the end, I don't think.
Yeah, you're right. Thanks.
Yep.
Anything else? Motion?
I make a
Make a
motion, we
motion.
approve the minutes as amended from
Second.
March 22nd.
Second,
Vote.
Arvanitis, aye.
Archer abstain, I was not there.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Walton, aye.
Thank you, AJ.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Fiscal year 23 budget updates. I think, Becky, you just sent us an updated version.
Yep. And do you want me to screen share?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Can everybody read it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the expense side. And at this point, I made three major changes. I put in the salaries with the market alignment addition that are in red and blue. Well, they're not color coded. They're all the salaries as I put them in. So the color coding doesn't really help here, but it's the new information that is definitely in blue and some in red. I also added the biggest number that Meryl was just reviewing. So the big whopper of the week is the rubbish and recycle hauling figure on line 130. The figure was 125,980 something, 990 something. So I rounded it up to 126. So we have an increase of $60,000, which is very close to wiping out our negative $64,444, the credit that was achieved through the regional assessment.
Becky,
Yes,
where does a tipping fee show up in here?
the tipping fees are under sanitary landfill waste.
Okay.
And
Didn't
that's
we,
been a close one. We did have to, we've raised it a little bit last year. That's another area that I'm gonna be getting year-end data just to try to be confident that we can stay with this figure. We did start to get some money back, which we hadn't been getting. Well, not the sanitary landfill, but in the overall recycling program, the recycling used to keep this number lower because we'd get a lot of credits. But that, as you know, from the discussion, you all are up to date on the fact that those credits have been reduced quite a bit. We used to get quarterly payments of about $1,500 for our recycling program. And we don't get those now. We get monthly payments, but we don't get them every month. It varies. So I want to look closer at that and be sure that the 35,000 in sanitary landfill will be sufficient. The other pressure on that number will be our current tipping fee is, I think, $82.50, and the new one has just gone up to $90. We are fortunate other communities, a conglomerate of 31 communities is working with Casella right now. And we understand they will not be offered the $90 that we were offered. The timing of the knowledge of the bankruptcy was critical in our ability to pivot with the RFP. We were able to amend our RFP in the final few days to, and then give an extension to include the tipping that originally was not in our RFP. So by including that, we were able to successfully get a lower tipping fee that's being offered to a coalition of 31 towns that we have often been part of. And even negotiating as 31 towns, they're not getting a lower rate. They're still higher than our $90. So those are the two biggest numbers in play right now. The other issue, like I said, was inputting all the new alignment numbers. And that being said, we are scheduling an appointment with the Select Board and Finance Committee with the Personnel Board for a next meeting to discuss that. We discovered one problem in the market alignment. There was one grade 8 member that was very much out of sync with all the others. And the Personnel Board has met to address that and want to bring that information to the Finance Committee and Select Board for discussion.
Melody, you have a question for now before Becky continues on this topic, or?
Not really a question, just noticing right under line 132, it says total solid waste. Is that a French pronunciation?
Oh, I love it. Thank you very much. Great catch. Thank you, Melody. Well, Jim, I think I pretty much covered it. And oh, I can't, it's in a PDF right now. So bringing to the grand finale is, okay, the other change is the surplus I have added to our excess capacity. So you'll see that at the moment, we're looking at a $6,733,000 budget. And that the revenue will agree with that when we go to look at revenue. But there's still one concern I have that I wanted to get input from the Finance Committee. I think in the end, I need to verify the details, but there is not going to be an increase in the health insurance line this year. I think we are going to potentially have one more family added with transitions in retirement. But at the same time, we're going to have cost savings of people going on to retirement that had family plans. So I think the status quo, it's very likely we can level fund this number at $520,000.
Wow, that's big.
And if you guys want to ask me any other questions that you need answered before doing that, that would, please do that. So, because at this point, I believe that would be within the ballpark, and we should be fine with 520, considering we are showing overages this year and not anticipating increases from our provider. I think it's doable.
When we met with the treasurer, he was talking about some families that he knew, or some employees who he knew were going from single to family this spring. That's not the issue anymore? Did you talk to the treasurer?
That's still, I believe we're still under, I will get a full count from him tomorrow. He's going to be in tomorrow morning. But I'm pretty certain even with that, we potentially are going to be under by more money than would cover the singles going to families.
That's
But-
awesome. That's great.
And if we, in worst case scenario, if everything turns upside down, we'd have to come to the finance committee. But I think it's a very doable thing that I would recommend. And any other expenses that you have questions about? The longevity has been fully reviewed and put in. We have Ellen McKay has officially hit, I think we're 1 year off from her calendar dates. She's talking about she's been here 46 years, but we are catching up to her with her 45th year longevity payment, which is pretty significant. It's $1,250 for part-time. And then we have a couple smaller ones, one in the library, I believe for 300, and for the library assistant. And where's the other one? I think there's only 3. Okay. So where's the library? Okay, so we've got the library. Yeah, 150 for. Yeah, actually, I'm sorry, this one, I double checked this one and it is supposed to be 300. But I have to verify that. And the librarian is coming up on, this is her 15th year, and she has a longevity bonus for $750. And that's it. There's 3 this year.
I'm sorry, Susie and then George.
I had a question on the retirement one, line 162. I couldn't remember what was the reason for it going up, and I wondered if it went up enough, because there's kind of a lot of news right now about retirement programs in Hampshire County, so I just wanted to make sure this covers us.
This is, we're in Franklin County retirement. It's confusing because Hampshire County Trust is our health insurance.
Yeah.
But our retirement is Franklin County. I'm still waiting on Caitlin to verify this. I know we have one retiree we have 2 big retirements next year. I'm not sure, they haven't done, I haven't seen full calculations. We have one July 1st and then another October 1st. So this number could go up, but I haven't gotten this. I used the figure that the retirement board sent out for the town. So the only other piece that that's in question is the Union 28, the Irving personnel. That's the 13,000, and she hadn't made the calculation before, so this is still my estimate, and I need to get a verified number from her.
Thank you.
George,
So in our next meeting, we're going to look over the capital planning items, one of which is the library's $25,000. There is a chance that we're going to add that back to this budget. If we as a finance committee will talk about that, right? Just to be clear.
Yeah.
And then a very minor thing, Becky, I noticed, I think it was line 29, the numbering of the lines, it looks like there's some repeated numbers in terms of the line numbers. So just ask you to just take a look at that at some point and just make sure the numbers are right. I know it's a pain with all these lines and adding lines and things, but I did notice that there's a couple 29s and 30s. But that's all I have on expenses.
George, can you remind me, does the $25,000 allocation for the library building fund, does that usually come out of the budget, or is that usually one of our transfers? I'm just totally blanking on that.
We funded, no,
right
we've
now.
been funding it right in the budget.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't think we've been
Last
using
year.
free cash or anything.
Last year it came out of free cash.
Oh, that's right.
But before this, it's come out of the operating cost.
Right.
Right.
Right, that was a new development last year. Right, yeah, okay,
But
got it, thanks.
That's not in the budget this year at this point, right?
that was George's point.
I think it is on this sheet. Where
It's
did
got
I-
parentheses around it.
Right now, it's a 0 in what
It's
Becky
zero.
was just showing us.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I was wondering if we're going to add it back, but I did forget that we chose to fund it with cash last year. But historically, we have funded it right out of the operating budget, right out of the tax levy. So we'll have to see.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about the revenue? I guess I don't, had some questions about, because I
Well,
don't.
Becky crashed. She's probably trying to get on right now, but Becky crashed. So I looked at the revenue. It didn't look like it changed too much. Except she did. Yeah, when I looked at it, I saw that there is now a difference between last year's and this year's. I want to use the right term. Unspent levy, what's that called? Excess levy capacity. It looks like the excess levy capacity went up by 48,000. And if she lowers the health insurance by 35, that's going to become 83,000. That we're going to be decreasing the.
But don't we have a discussion about what we think could go for some of that money, like OPEB, capital stabilization? Isn't there a place in the process where we discuss those options?
Yeah. Well, they're in the
I
expense.
thought that was part
they're
of
in the
our
expense
discussion
report.
tonight, going through this, was the number for OPEB. No?
I don't know if that's.
Oh, yeah, we could talk about it. Yeah, for sure. I think we wanted to look over the analysis schedule was what I was prepared to do, but I don't know if we have time and what everybody thinks. But in terms of Susie's question, the capital funding of the capital stabilization account, it was in the budget. Becky had it in there at 121K, and then the 50K for OPEB is still in there as well. And so we did just cover it. We just didn't talk about it.
Well, the question that Susie raises is an important one. If there's a surplus in the budget between revenue and expense, what to do with that money? Should it go towards a capital fund? Should it go towards, I guess, the tax rate? Because we appropriated, we started with a certain increase in taxes, 2.5, whatever it was, but we didn't need it all. So can we put that back against the tax rate? That's the kind of discussion we have to have.
Right.
Go ahead. So I was just going to say, is it premature to have that discussion if we don't actually know if there is going to be a surplus and what amount? I mean, I understand there's the $33,000, but We also have already talked about how we may be adding a $25,000 allocation for the library building fund that would eat up some of that. So is it too early to have that discussion?
Well, I guess I was confused, like there was a surplus and now it's listed down at 0. And
Right.
there are some numbers on the revenue page that changed. And I have to say, I still do not have a sophisticated understanding of this.
Okay, but I can explain that until Becky comes back. If we all pull up the revenue schedule,
Becky's back.
okay. Yeah, and the surplus disappeared on the expense schedule, and Becky said she put in excess levy capacity, which means that lowers our tax levy, that
Right.
lowers our tax bill. That's where that money went. So when we look at line 2 on the revenue, the 2.5, we see 145, but but 48,000 on row 19 has to be subtracted from that when calculating what we're going to increase our tax levy by for next year. And 48,000, it looks like is too low because, like I said earlier, we'll add 35 to that to make it 83,000. So we're going to subtract 83 from the 145 in the 2.5 calculation. The math, that's 62,000, I believe. So we're going to be raising the tax levy by 62,000.
Right,
Which,
that's a choice. And like Bob.
no, the way it is right now is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I saw from the last revenue numbers we got and this set of revenue numbers we got that the excess levy capacity was increased. And that is how you could represent in this budget a lower than 2.5 increase and all expenses met. That's what the 0 is. But what I wanted to have a discussion about is other views of what to do when instead of tucking it all in on less excess levy capacity.
Bob.
I think maybe that AJ might be right because the final numbers haven't come in, but I do think it's an important discussion to have. It's really my point of view, and Susie's are probably going to be different because I think that we put a number out there to raise taxes. We start with that number just as a working number, and they took the max 2.5% under the law. And then we went ahead and we haven't got final numbers. We haven't recommended final numbers in this budget through all the lines yet. But when we do, if we have extra money, we should just reduce the amount of money we raise. I mean, it's not a problem to not raise it to the maximum. That's my own view. I mean, we have very high tax rate here in this town, as we all know. So I'm concerned that we think of this money that we have to deal with somehow when we really just use this mechanism that is the 2.5% and went forward with the budgeting process. I think that the right thing to do is, I don't like the language of adding it to the excess levy capacity. I like the idea of saying we reduce the levy because that's really the way I prefer to see it, you know?
Well, they're one and the same. It's just different wording. And when we do our annual report, I think what we say on the annual report is, you know, the tax rate, the tax levy is increasing by $62,000. We're not going to say by 145, but don't forget about the 83. We're going to say it increases by 62,000, which is X percent, roughly 1% of our total budget.
Yeah.
So I think, Bob, that's ultimately what we say if we choose to balance the budget the way it is right in front of us.
Maybe I could do this another way. Maybe I could say that I'm interested in planning an increase in OPEB funding. And that, you know, probably people can understand where that's coming from. They might disagree, but so rather than it being a general discussion or a philosophical discussion, my suggestion is that we increase our OPEB line from 50,000 up to something else. And we could talk about
Susie, what I would say about that is we should look at the analysis before we talk about a dollar amount for that. Because I adjusted my schedule based on the conversation we had with Parker last week. There was a few revelations in there that made, I think, I would say, material changes to the way we've been doing it. conceptually, we're doing the right thing and have been all along, but he's saying use a higher interest rate than what our treasurer used to tell us to use. And listening to Becky, who said last year we made 14%, I think we should be using a higher interest rate than we've been using in the past, and that's going to have an impact on this schedule. And then the other thing is, like we all discovered in the last meeting, we don't have an obligation to fully fund this liability ever. So that changes the equation. I think we need to talk about that more. If I understand what you're saying, you're interested in maintaining the obligation, but the analysis I think is really important to make that decision.
Yeah, Becky, I think you had your hand up. Are you on mute? I can't tell with your mask on.
Can't hear you.
Becky, I think you might be on mute.
Might be having the problem I had earlier.
Sorry, I couldn't find it with the shared document.
Disappears sometimes.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say, I had a chance to go over George's spreadsheet about the OPEB, and there were some kind of revelations. So I think before we, if we're gonna spend any time discussing it, we should go through the chart, that the worksheet that he put together. But I think Susie's question isn't just to OPEB, it's to a number of other things. But I think OPEB at this moment, I think we learned a lot with Parker, and George took that to another level. And I hope we have a chance to do that tonight or at the next meeting.
I'd like to do it tonight. I'm not sure why we would put it off.
Yeah, we did have it on the agenda originally. We had talked about getting into this tonight.
Wow, it's a big
Okay.
conversation.
Agenda.
I'm gonna take control of the screen then.
Let me give it to you, George.
I'll try to make this quick.
Quicker than Miriam?
It
was
recycling committee.
It was everyone. The issue took much longer than anybody thought.
A lot of people wanted to talk on that subject.
Yeah. Lots of questions raised.
Okay, so I know you've all seen the schedule before. It's not going to be necessarily new to you. When we first built this schedule, we were told by the treasurer that when we are investing under $1 million, that we earn about a 1%. And when we have more than $1 million, we can get 4%. And so we've been using those assumptions for a long time. But it turns out Parker's saying we can get 5.65%. That's what actuaries are using for this kind of financing, for an interest return, because we can use something that's, what was the term, somewhat aggressive, because a portion of the investments are in stocks. And so I'm using a much higher interest rate here on all balances, regardless of how much we have. And so that's the first thing you see here. This particular schedule, this is the balance that the actuary said we had in our bank account on July 1st of 2021. So it's our starting balance for the current fiscal year. We've approved $50,000. It's in our current fiscal year's budget. When I calculate interest at this new rate, we could earn $43,000 this year, and that would bring us up to here. Right now, it's kind of hard to believe that the stock market's down 5% in the first quarter. But anyhow, it could recover, and the 565 might actually happen. So then that balance comes forward into the new year, assuming we approve 50,000 for 2023, then our interest income would be that amount, basically based on both of these, because this money's invested at the beginning of the year, plus that's already in there, and then our balance grows. So this schedule is just doing that. It's taking what we fund, OPEB, trust fund, from our operating budget, plus the interest income we would earn. If there's OPEB costs, those would get subtracted, and then this number would come down. The way I have the model at this very moment, just for illustration purposes, I don't have that in here. And you see it just grows. If we just keep putting $50,000 a year in for the next, this is 51 years are on the schedule. We'll have $26 million at 20,072. So just to illustrate how it works. And that makes sense to everybody, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so then there's the right side of this, and this is the part that I built to help us kind of figure out what's the right way to do this. If we don't have to fund 100%, we need to find a balance in the amount that we can pay out of the budget each year that we can live with and allows us to continue to fund these liabilities. So I'm opening up, now we're looking from H to N. H, this is from the actuary report, which is right there. There's a, oh, I was on that page. I don't know what happened. Oh, I rebooted. Give me a second here. There was a large schedule with, I don't have my, there's this schedule here. And this is the actuary doing the calculation of what our future liabilities will be, basically doing the kind of thing I'm doing, where he's looking at what our balance is, and then he's adding interest. It's in here somewhere. He's got the costs, and then he keeps it running, and he's showing how much we're going to owe in the future. The only thing I take from this is what the employer share of the benefit is each year. And so these are the amounts in our health insurance line that are specifically for retired individuals. And so those numbers there, and I double check with Parker, that's what we should be using. That's what we have here. The first one he had was 86. That was a previous fiscal year. This year he's projecting it's going to be 94,690. And so I have projected, based on the current actuary report, how much we're going to pay each year for our retirees. His numbers are crazy. And these numbers are just crazy scary, of course, so are these years. So that's the first thing I put in here. And then the other thing I put in here is, how are we going to fund it? This is where we try to figure out how we're going to fund it. Currently, fiscal 22, and every year up to this point has been right out of the operating budget. This is the portion of the $520,000 in health insurance that is specifically for the retired people on our health insurance bills. And so right now, this model shows we pay as we go. It's just in the tax rate, and it continues to grow inside the health insurance line as we increase it. And that's how it's going to grow year over year. And so then we could also take some money from the trust fund to fund the liability. And that's where you're going to see numbers popping in here. And then over here would be the total amount that is coming out of our operating budget. And what that really is the portion that's in the health insurance line that we approved, plus whatever amount we're funding, which has been historically the last 5-6 years, $50,000 a month. So that's what we're paying in fiscal 22, based on what we approved and what the actuary is saying we're going to pay actually to retirees. This plus the 50,000 is 144. So the question is, what's the right amount for us to pay out of our budget each year? And so to do that, I've created these 3 input fields that we can modify and adjust and see how they affect our fund. First of all, in his report, he said we should have $3.6 million right now set aside, and that would allow us to pay all the future benefits that he knows about. Essentially, if we had that amount in the fund today, we would be able to pay all of these, all the way down to his last year. Now, what I did was I created 3 inputs, as I said earlier: annual budget limit. What amount do we want to always, what amount do we never want to exceed in any fiscal year? I put in 1.5 just so that nothing would happen. I used a really high number, but we're looking at 144 right now. It goes up each year. So let's just throw in 200,000 as a starting point. Let's say we never want to spend more than 200,000. So in this year here, we've got 140 is equal to the OPEB cost that we will be paying, plus the 50, we're at 190, so we're under that. This subsequent year, he said, Parker estimates we're going to pay 155 plus our 50, puts us at 205. That's what this column is. This column is this number plus that number. So 205, we're over our limit. So what pops up in the schedule is a shortfall. We come up short. This will be the first year where we would run into problems. If we said we don't ever want to spend more than 200,000, but we want to fund at 50,000 a year, then we run into problems here. And what happens is, we don't need to get into that right now, but you can see this flags where we would start to run short. The next input is we say maybe we want our base to be 200,000, but we all know that health insurance costs rise year over year. So maybe we want to put an inflation factor in. Being a municipality, we might want to say maybe that number should increase by 2.5% each year. And our limit is 200,000 in current dollars, but it's going to be something bigger future dollars. I'll put in 1% for now. And we can talk about that more. And then I put in this where we can decide for our modeling purposes that we don't want to draw anything out of this fund until some point in the future. We're still trying to build it up and we didn't want to take anything out of it. So we pick a year when we're okay to start taking money. Now I got it set at 2070 only again, because I didn't want to start showing numbers coming out of here. But we might make, let's say we decide on 2030 that we think that's an appropriate time for the fund to build up. And we can start using the fund to pay bills. In fact, I'm going to change that to 2025. Well, it doesn't matter actually. Okay, so I'm going to change it to 2030. So the point is, these three input numbers will affect when money starts coming out of the OPEB trust fund. So if we say we think 200 is a good limit and it increases by 1% each year, this year, the actual amount, the 50,000 plus 175 in the retirement exceeds our limit number. So this is the year when a portion of our payment will actually come from the OPEB fund. So there is being subtracted out at this point in time. And so we can change these numbers and watch where these things happen. What we're really, I think, going to be looking for as we make those changes, we come down. And what we see in this scenario that I've laid out, $200,000 limit increasing by 1%, don't take money out before 2030. And by the way, that's a good point. Let me just go back here. Get on my keyboard, working off my laptop. It turns out, well, that was a funny number to use, because it turns out that that's roughly the time when we hit our limit. Now, if I put in 2025, it wouldn't have taken anything out. But if I put in 2035 and I said, don't take any money out of the fund until 2035, we'd have run into shortfalls. In other words, we would have been funding, our operating budget would have been underfunded if we went with these numbers. Anyways, so when we watch these activities, the other thing to note is the maximum balance, the balance grows each year. Let me go back. So the balance grows, we're not taking anything out. So it grows and it grows and it grows. Now we start taking things out, but there's still nominal amounts in the first few years. And then they start to go up. And then we get to a point where our balance starts to go down. Our starting balance or the previous year's ending balance starts to go down, because now we're at a point where we actually need to draw more out of the fund than we're earning in interest and we're putting in. And so I would suggest to this committee that we look for some sort of combination input factors here that will give us an idea of how we can maintain a positive balance here, so that future finance committees don't have to look back at us and say, geez, those guys underfunded it. Now we got to make up for it and it's killing our budget. And so this is really what we want to look at. In this particular scenario, 200,000 and then start drawing, we're going to run out of funds in 2062, which, wow, I'll be over 100 years old. So,
Yeah, right.
It is all just for, it's just to give us a good idea of where we are now and how things look. Every time there's an actual report, I'm going to update this, or somebody will update this. I'm going to give this spreadsheet to the town, so the treasurer or the town administrator, whoever wants, can do it and keep. And the finance committees in the future keep looking at these and see how they shake out. To me, this is actually pretty I think this looks really good. And knowing that we don't have to, when I thought we had to be fully funded at 2040, that just seemed so hard to do. And that was going to take really large increase. In fact, when I asked Parker, he said $250,000 a year is what we should be funding that. Now we're in a situation where we could be, what I wanted to show you. And then Bob, I think you want to ask a question, but we get to a point where the balance gets really high and our interest income gets really high. And then this thing starts to self-support, to really support itself. And if we look at this number and this number ever changes, or we decide that this number is too conservative, we could really see positive impacts here. And that would push this maximum out even farther. You had a question, Bob?
Yeah, well, a couple of comments. One is there's so many assumptions in these projections, especially going out a couple of decades or more, that they become, pretty silly in a way, because we don't know what the interest rates are going to be. We don't know what they're going to be next year, never mind 10 years from now. We don't know what kind of returns we're going to get. So these numbers really can't be cast forward accurately at all. Number two, we don't know what kind of healthcare is going to be provided and how it'll be compensated in the future. Number three, the actuary did tell us that we're in the top 11% in the state for funding our OPEB, which I think is kind of wonderful. It shows us that we're way ahead of the game in terms of other towns and communities in the state. And if these other towns aren't funding as well or as judiciously as we are, there's no way that they're not going to continue to pay the healthcare costs in the future. There's going to be some, in my opinion, it's very likely that you can assume a government bailout of OPEB in the state of Massachusetts going forward, because if they're not going to require it, these towns are not going to do it. So I think
just
we're in
one
really good shape.
correction, Bob. You said 11% of municipalities or more. It's really we're funded at the 20% level. Where we are we're at 81% of municipalities.
Okay, 81. Sorry,
81, which is still a very healthy
very
number.
good.
It seems like it's still a very healthy number, but
anyway, I think we're in really good shape. I think we're doing a good job. I think we could do more, but really it's very hard to be talking about 20, 50, 60. I mean, we don't know. We have no idea.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, this is really to give you it's to give you a little perspective, give you an idea. Long range plans, they never turn out to be accurate, but they kind of give us an idea of what we should be doing and what the future looks like. I think for me, this is really optimistic, because I ultimately think, and Becky and I talked about this after the personnel board meeting last night, this could be this money we put aside. And if we continue to put this, I think, modest amount aside, could help us fund our health insurance budgets in the long run. And actually, when we start drawing these amounts, we're going to be offsetting our health insurance. And this thing could actually start earning interest, especially if we do better than this 5.65 each year. It could not only self-fund the OPEB portion of the health insurance, but it might even be able to finance more than that. So,
George, could you put in the 9% and show them what happens?
So if I use 9%, now look at our interest income. And remember, I just don't think we're going to get 9% this year, but be that as it may, your numbers get bigger, and look at how they compare to the OPEB cost. We exceed, if we were to get 9% every year, we exceed the OPEB cost starting in 2026, basically, right? 4 years from now. And now we're in a situation where maybe we want to start, I'm going to lower the limit, start drawing faster out of the fund and see what happens. So 165, we get shortfalls in a couple of years. So I changed it to 167.6. And now we don't start drawing until this year, but we're going to be able to draw and mitigate some of our health insurance costs. And in the meantime, if you look all the way over to column B, we're still growing. So that gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility in the long run. if it turns out that we can get those good returns.
Hey, Susie,
So I understand we can't predict the future, and I understand that we're the finance committee and our job is to equip the town to meet what expenses we can identify or generally, and we know people retire. So I'm wondering, George, if you are suggesting a 1% increase over the 50,000 for each year. Was that an upshot of this chart?
No, I would suggest that we keep the 50,000 as it is this year. We do this analysis next year and talk about it. And let's see how our investment earnings are going. I think what we've been doing has been working for us. If the interest rates are better and this grows faster. By the way, Becky and I look back at the last one I did of this, and we actually predicted that this number would be 683. The balance at the beginning of this fiscal year would be 683. So what we've done in the past was a little short, but conservative. So I was pretty happy about that. But I think we need to monitor it. I think it's too soon to change what we're doing, but there is the possibility that we could in the future years start ramping this down if the investment rates work really well for us. And I think we need to keep getting these numbers as Parker does them and see how this thing is working. That's my suggestion is we don't do anything this year and we just monitor it year over year. And I think we'll get to a year where we might change what we're doing, but I don't see anything here that would suggest that I don't think changing this by 1% or $10,000 is going to make a whole heck of a lot of difference. I think how this goes is going to really make a big difference for us. We just monitor it. The other thing I would say to Bob's point is, Bob, you did make a point about OPEB being in trouble and rescuing the towns. I would say that what this just means, towns that are underfunded on OPEB are just going to have to continue to increase their health insurance line, and they're going to have to fund it out of their operating budget. And under 2.5, they are going to run into problems. But they're going to be obligated to pay these. The health insurance line is going to be what it's going to be, and they're going to have to fund it. So if they're underfunding, they're hurting themselves. And the larger communities in our state, because I was at an OPEB conference, the larger communities in our state, many of them out east in particular, they're 100% funded. And they were pretty upset that there's not a requirement for the other municipalities to do that. This was a long time ago, and this was before I had two select board members had told us that we do have to fund this by 2040.
So you're aware that there are big towns like Boston and are funded fully now, Springfield?
Yeah, I don't know what towns these guys were from, but there was a couple guys there and they raised their hands and said, you're giving these other towns a free ride. We've been funding it all along. It's in our tax rate, and they were not happy, honestly. I mean, guy next to me
Like Weston and Brookline, those kind of towns.
Those are not that big a town, but they're rich towns.
Yes.
Rich towns.
Yeah, bigger than us towns. You're right.
Yeah.
But yes, rich towns, Brookline. But yeah, so there were some finance. These are finance managers. These are towns that have finance directors, and they know finance inside out and backwards, and they know you're supposed to fund these long-term liabilities, and they have been. But there are a lot of towns, like you said, that are much worse off than we are in terms of building up their accounts. But I think what we've done is going to pay off in the long run, because I think we're going to be able to set some limits on how much we can fund this 50,000. I think there's a possibility that in the future, maybe within the next 10 years, maybe sooner, we could start lowering that number. And we'd still be in a pretty good shape because the interest income on what we have in there is going to be able to fund the OPEB portion and possibly more. That said, I think the first year, 2022, I think 9% is not.
I think we're in good shape too. That's what you're saying, George. I agree with you.
Yeah. Susie, is your hand up again?
Yeah, I just want to say that because George has done this work and suggests that we monitor where we're at and come back and look at it, but we have I'm very clear now on the framework, look at it again next year. So I'm not suggesting an OPEB change in our budget for FY23.
Okay, so for purposes of this discussion and for the budget, do we need to, we have 50,000 plugged in right now for the budget. Do we need to vote on that or are we,
I'll make a motion that we support that in the budget this year.
I'll second that.
okay? And unless there's any further discussion, or have we had enough discussion? Okay, if we can vote.
Arvanitis, aye.
Chartier,
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, eye.
Mosher, aye.
Walton, I. Okay.
George, will you send us those sheets?
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same, that the Odyssey, those Odyssey sheets, and maybe the spreadsheet, both the Odyssey sheets and the spreadsheet would be helpful.
Well, you all have the Odyssey sheet. That was what we got from, Parker.
I don't think that was sent to all of us.
Yeah.
I don't think we got it.
No, we didn't get, I think only you got that, George.
oh, the actuarial report. Okay,
You're the only one that got that because you were working with them.
okay.
If you could forward that to us and your spreadsheet.
Sure. You know, as far as my spreadsheet, proprietary content. I mean, if you want to play with it, play with it, but I would ask you to be discreet with it and just keep it for yourselves. And if you have questions about it, if you want to play with it, play with it. If you have questions, let me know. I'm always looking for suggestions on improving things. So
Yeah.
if there's any way we can make that better and more useful, I'm all ears. But also, I'm going to send it to everybody in the finance committee, but I'm going to ask you not to share it with people outside of the finance committee.
Yeah, I just think it would be a benefit to us for us to get our own hands around it individually, just to understand how these different impacts, how they impact things.
Okay, will do.
Yeah.
Will do. And like I said, if you have a question on any of it, if you ran the numbers and you have a question about the results you see, or if you just have questions about it in general, I'm happy to help.
Thanks, George.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your work, George. That was super helpful.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Are we good with the budget for now, for fiscal year 23 budget? Are we good with that for now?
Well, I think we want to look at the
Until our
revenue.
next
piece.
meeting anyway?
Did we want to have Becky look over the revenue piece?
The other thing, I didn't catch a date for when we're going to meet with personnel and select board. Is that dated?
Was it a week from Thursday?
Yes, I believe we ended up on the 14th. That way we don't ask, otherwise FinCom would have had to come to the select board meeting and have 2 meetings.
Okay, so
But the
That's
select board
a week from Thursday.
Yeah,
That
and the
capital
select
plan,
board agreed to come to that, and it'll be at 7 o'clock.
So that will be our next finance committee meeting, a week from Thursday at 7 o'clock instead of 6:30.
I did have
Okay,
another
was
question.
there anything else you want to go on the revenue side of the budget?
I guess I still think, I have the previous revenue projection and the excess levy capacity was projected at a different number. So I feel like this is something to think about.
Okay.
Susie, Jim and Susie, you were gonna have meetings for the annual report. Have you, I haven't seen any invitations for those.
Well,
We haven't sent any out yet.
Okay,
and we also, like, we could probably do a first pass, but usually we use numbers from the budget and the cap plan and all that. The rest of it, I mean, what the first pass would just be like it, as if it's a template, wouldn't have real specific things. So I'm not sure that we need to meet before we get real numbers.
okay.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
people could look at last report and see if there's something that struck them as this needs to be clarified for the public, or this didn't work. People could look at last year's and give us some, I mean, whoever's going to do it needs some, would take suggestions.
Okay. We want to get into expense report.
Jim, before we do, I just want to clarify that the meeting on the 14th is to go over the personnel board issue with the select board, and then to review the capital plan. And then there will be a following meeting on the 19th, is my understanding, and then the vote on the capital items will be at that meeting. Is that what everybody else understands? I just want to be clear.
Yes.
Okay.
The vote on the 19th is all warrant articles, right? When FinCom recommends stuff that's on beyond. Well, so I'm asking, do we get to see the warrant articles on the 19th?
The schedule that we talked about was in the minutes.
Susie, I can't do the warrant articles till you guys vote the numbers.
Yeah, that's why I thought our votes would be done on the 14th. And then on the 19th, we were going to review the warrant and make the FinCom votes.
That was my understanding too.
Okay, so that's what you meant by vote. You were talking about voting on the warrant, not voting on the capital items.
So
I'm just fixing up, because earlier AJ had outlined the meeting on tonight's meeting and then the next, so there was a 2-meeting thing for capital items that had been outlined by you guys in your minutes and in your meetings before. That's why I'm confused.
Yeah,
So I think, yeah, so I think those two things were what we did last week, which is just to review the capital requests. And then I think the plan was at our next meeting, which I guess is now the 14th, for the committee to vote on funding of those items. And then that would, I think the thought was that would give you and the select board an opportunity to draft the warrants for us to vote on the 19th. But that was, I don't know, that was my understanding.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah,
That's what we all-
Bob,
Understanding was the same, and I'm just concerned that if we start piling a lot of other agenda items on the Thursday meeting, that we're gonna be squeezed, because if we're gonna vote on them, which I thought we were going to do, we need ample time for that. That's gonna take up a lot of time.
I think we only have two
one
items.
item added, Bob.
And
Okay,
the
so I just
personnel
thought we
board-
added a bunch of
and the
that.
personnel board one now, so maybe we meet at 6:30 or something.
We
Yeah, I think
can't.
we'll
No,
No. it's
has to
not
be 7.
possible. It has to be 7.
Okay, fine, then
It
7
took,
o'clock.
it took 3 hours and 10 different committees to work out the time, Susie. It's
But
not.
I mean, the
variable.
no, right, never mind.
All right.
George, you got a spreadsheet for that?
I can work on one if you'd like. AJ had it in the minutes, so I think, yeah, I can cut and paste.
How about expense report?
I don't know. I'm burnt out personally.
You like all the expenses, Bob? Everything looks good.
No, I'm burnt out, man. Like, I'm on like a rechargeable battery. It needs a charge.
Huh? I thought I had a couple questions. One question, just it's sort of minor, but that COVID bonus, that was for last year's salary. Is there a plan or a timing to give out that bonus?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else have questions on expenses?
Well, general questions for Becky about the building. Electricity and heating look like they're both going to crash. But maybe heating is already done. I mean, heating's at 99% spent right now, and electricity is at 87%. Those are lines, those are on the first page. They're the last 2 lines, actually the last second and third from the bottom.
This has been a weird heating year.
I mean, is it an oil tank and it's full, so we don't have to worry?
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so then
But
heating's
it's-
okay.
I'm just concerned, yeah, I think we're trying to get a better handle on the mini splits.
Is that affecting the electricity line?
Yes.
Are
They
you
aren't
feeling
always
like,
turned off.
So
are
we
you
have
feeling like FY '23 needs to be looked at more carefully for that?
Potentially, but we'll start with the behavior first.
Sweaters all around.
Yeah. Well, I found the heat on occasion on a Monday morning.
Oh, I wonder if we can get an electronic thermostat that can be locked.
So we have those. It's the mini splits aren't on those. The mini splits are manual.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I need to look into getting them on thermostats. For the most part, it's been working very well.
I had a question, Becky, on the snow removal expenses.
Okay.
We ended up using the whole budget, and I thought it was a pretty light snow year. So I guess I was sort of surprised to see we went through the whole budget.
That's one of the climate change issues. Well, although we don't have as much snow, the freezing rain is worse.
Okay.
On the
And
dirt roads.
so we end up using up more materials and it happens more frequently. So it's the dirt roads primarily that are sucking down a lot more time and materials. Because we have, instead of, the rainy spring used to be, March into April, maybe a
Yeah.
little May. Now it starts in January, February, March, and so it's just crazy. The weather is really driving it.
Okay. Okay, and also in the highway area, there was a couple on the low end that I was wondering about. There's road stripping that's running on the low side,
Right.
as well as highway materials that's running on the low side.
The seasonal.
Probably already striped.
We might blow through that in the spring. Is that what you're saying, Susie?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
season.
Yeah.
The catch basins, yeah. And then the contributory retirement at the bottom of page 3. But we already increased it for next year, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Yes,
But-
that's 13,000 up.
Right, that's right.
but we're still waiting to be sure it's enough. Yeah. And the health insurance line, George, I don't have it up.
Health insurance right now, we spent 63%. So we spent 327 out of a budget of 520. Wow, that's really good. And we're 3/4 of the way through the year.
Yeah.
I think there's one that we've gotten discussion on before, tree warden expenses. We haven't spent anything so far this fiscal year.
Our current tree warden doesn't believe in spending any money, and it's very difficult to know what is getting done or not. He needs to report to the select board again, because he says he finds other ways to get National Grid to do everything, but it's there is work not getting done.
Well, he's got a lot of money to get it done. Are
Well,
we gonna
I
let
guess
that
that's
roll
one of
over
my
next-
points, and I guess we're probably budgeted for a similar amount in 23.
It's about a couple $1,000s, right? Or 1,800.
Well, it's over 9,000.
Right.
Well, the ninth,
I was thinking the year that we did the other work.
Yeah, the budget's for over 9,000, and there's
Yeah.
nothing spent.
I have to get on him. Because there's a lot of work that's not getting done. And
and
he's not identifying it as needing to get done. But our highway department works diligently to really take care of a lot of issues. And for the most part, if he sees an issue, he calls our highway department to deal with it. But there are other issues that they can't handle, that he needs to address.
Becky,
Bob,
question for you. I know we raised that line quite a bit when they were doing the work down in Pratt Corner, when they were doing the major work. We decided to increase the line for the tree warden. Did we ever adjust that back when the
Yes.
work was completed?
Yes, so you were thinking about the same line I was. That year, we raised it to about $2,000 and it's normally about 800 or 700.
Right.
And I believe it's back to that amount. The amount people are talking about is the $9,000 to be used to hire tree contractors. to come
Contractors,
in.
right.
And he has not hired any in 2 or 3 years.
yes, I guess my point is we've been through this in the past and we're still budgeting. So it seems like something should give. Either there should be more stuff going on or we just cut the budget back.
That's logical.
What about zeroing it out for this year? Is that something we want to consider if it's just, if
I would
money is just
appreciate
piling up
that
in
you
the.
don't, because the issue is that it's the individual in the position. It's not that the work doesn't need to get done. So that needs to be addressed by the select board, not by the finance committee.
It's pretty absurd to think that the town of Shutesbury's tree warden isn't spending money. I mean, how many?
Question, does that money go back into reserves or does
Yeah.
it doesn't accumulate?
Well, it has been accumulating though, Becky.
Yeah.
Right?
That's why it's 9,000, right? Our budget is $4,477.
The
So
taxpayers have already paid these amounts in.
Well, the other trick is when he does have a project, they're very expensive because it's only on the largest trees. Like we got so backed up at the cemetery, we had to get a grant to cover the amount. So when, $4,000 in tree work doesn't get you much more than one tree.
Right. That's
Yeah.
true. And we're a town full of trees and there's town liabilities for trees in certain places. So we do need to get this straightened out with the tree warden. I don't think cutting the budget's the right answer. I think making sure that the task is understood and acted on so that we don't get far behind.
But that's not our role as finance committee, so.
But-
Looking at the budget line, if there's an accumulation of $9,000, do we have to add more money into this year? That's the question.
Yeah, Becky, if you're going to talk to him, we would like to know, what's the appropriate amount based on the trees in our town. And not spending money is not a solution on this line.
Like I said, we have an unusual situation with the current tree warden. But I think at this point, if it was, I think that we need to address it in a way that we can figure out how to move forward and handle our liabilities. I don't think zeroing it out. I think this person is making it a political issue and priding himself on saving the town money by not spending it. But inadvertently, he's not doing his job.
And the select board is addressing this.
They will be addressing it. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. All right. Another one we've talked about in the past, but I'm not sure where we ended up. School transportation, elementary school. Transportation is 84,000 budgeted and still nothing spent.
A little weird.
I know last year, I don't know why we haven't, I know we've gotten the first half of the bills. I'll look into why it's not spent yet. You're talking about this year, FY22.
Yeah, this year we have a budget at 84,000 and we haven't spent any.
What page are you on?
Page 2.
I'm in the school, so it's the
Bottom of
toward the
page-
bottom of page 2 in the school area. Right near the bottom of
Yeah.
page 2.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that I just put an envelope in the treasurer's box from the school for that line item. So we'll see what happens with that bill.
And the buses have been running even with, I mean, COVID didn't affect it, that
Oh, yeah.
transportation this year, right?
No, it hasn't. I think in the beginning of the year, there were some problems, but they've been running all year.
Okay.
So it's not like we're not going to be liable for the amount.
Yeah, right.
Anybody else? How about committee reports?
I can tell you the building committee is now investigating putting a toilet and running water in the library. I met with the health agent that works for the town, Charlie Kinnicky, yesterday, and discussed it with him. And we're gonna look, actually, I should be bringing this up with you all, because the next step in that process would be, we haven't discussed it at a building committee meeting yet. The next step in that process would be paying for an engineer to scope it out, so that, Charlie and I both agreed that there's a well on the common and there's a septic system across the street that in all likelihood would work for the library. And with a tank and a maceration pump, the refuse, the material could be, the effluent could be pumped over to the field across the street at Town Hall. And could probably do that by drilling under the road. I don't know, would be more efficient digging it up or drilling underneath it, but that's something else to study. Of course, after all that's been figured out, there's going to be a cost estimate for pulling out the composting toilet and putting in a regular toilet and sink. So, and a pump. So that's being studied at the moment. The other thing is Becky could tell you that we've had an HVAC engineer, and he's probably going to be ready to put out bidding documents pretty soon for the school, for an upgrade in the school controls for the heating system. So yeah, and and the select board is talking about dissolving the building committee and reforming it in a different manner. We discussed that tonight before our meeting at the select board meeting, and there's going to be some more discussion, I guess, going forward. The select board is the one responsible for sponsoring an article to change the charge of the building committee. So that's something to watch for the future. I guess that's about it for what we're doing. We're going to be discussing the school roof at the next building committee meeting. Something the finance committee is going to have to, we're going to talk about here. Plan B, we call it. We have put in an application for state grant money for the roof project, but I support and the building committee supports and capital planning. Well, the capital planning committee has not voted on that.
Yes,
But
they did.
we
They did vote on
supported the
that.
engineering part of it. That's going to be coming to the finance committee for evaluation. So yeah, so those are all things that are happening in the building committee at the moment.
Susie,
So for the HVAC, you said an engineer has done a, what did you say?
It's the controls for the
Yeah, I know.
HVAC, the heating system.
Right, and where are we in that process now?
I think the final documents for bidding are being prepared right now.
Bid document. So the engineer prepares those?
Yes,
And is that the project that we thought ARPA money would pay?
yes.
Okay, and so the bid is being prepared by the engineer, and then we find out what that amount is, right? We don't know what it is yet.
No, we don't, but we already actually appropriated money from last year's town meeting to pay for this, but we're also hoping to get compensated for this work from the federal government, right, Becky?
It's been talked about, there's, but whether it's this part of the roof, I mean, the heating or the ventilation you also spoke about.
Yeah.
And that part hasn't been quoted yet.
Okay, that's the part I'm getting confused.
And
about.
there is, yeah.
There was
there's
another
ventilation,
part, a whole
But
nother
there has
idea.
not been a full determination of how our ARPA funds are gonna be spent.
But this is what Bob described, the HVAC controls and systems is not the big project that was talked about, that since ARPA funds were coming, maybe we would do, I've forgotten what you just called it.
Ventilation.
Just ventilation. So HVAC is just controls, and then there's another project that could happen that's called ventilation.
Right. I call the whole building ventilation system, which would give us fresh air that's been preheated from exhaust through a manifold and then filtered through a HEPA filter. That's the kind of recommendation for a modern building, that if we can get the government to pay for that, it's going to make for a much more hygienic environment for the kids and for anybody who works there, of course, and it's something that's been funded, I think, and I'm hoping that we can chase down the money because there's money out there. I don't know what the process is, but I'm certainly hungry for us to get at it,
But that means we weren't talking about ARPA funds for the HVAC controls and system. That
Yes, we
wasn't-
were. We were talking about that. That's what we talked about
Talking
last
about
week.
in two different projects.
It's two projects.
Okay.
Jim,
Yeah, the state has set aside, what was $195 million to support HVAC issues as to do with air handling. This was last summer, and all we needed to do was to apply for it, and we would get all of that paid for. Have we followed up on that? I guess not. Becky?
We have followed up on the ARPA funds. You never showed me exactly which pile. of
What was
money.
it? It was in the Boston Globe, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a major
$500,000
announcement that money was going to go to fund air handling systems, especially in public school systems like the one we have in Shutesbury. And I've been harping on this for a long time. And once that money goes to the rich towns or all those other towns out there that that want to grab a hold of it, we may get nothing unless we get on the stick and apply for it and get it. Grand. I mean, this is free money. We could all this could be easily covered, at least that part of it.
What is the difference between this and what was reported that we were getting $565,000 of? Remember that? We were getting over $500,000.
We
I thought
already
that was
have the
ARPA.
ARPA funds. Yeah, we have half of it in-house. The 275 is in-house. And Jim is saying that the state has a pot of money that is available for those issues. But we can also use the ARPA funds that we already have 50% of.
And the thing is, if it's 565 that they've already committed to our town, I don't see how we're ever going to spend that amount of money given the restrictions that they have. It's great news that the HVAC system at the elementary school will be covered by it, but it sounds like we already have it, Jim.
No, there's more money than that, than what we've been apportioned through that first. As Becky just pointed out, every town was listed and given an apportionment, right, Becky? But
Yeah.
beyond that, there's other funds available that we could apply for.
Right.
The
But my point-
state has pots of money that is available to towns for education. And
But
it's
they have-
still there. Jim has, is overstating the situation.
I have not overstated the situation. It was in the Boston Globe and it was well presented and advertised. This was a separate pot of money that had nothing to do with what you're talking about,
Still
George.
exists.
But my point is, the amount of money that we've already been allocated in the first tranche, and we have another tranche coming, you have to spend it in specific ways, right? Ways that are supposedly related to mitigating the effects of COVID. We are not going to, do we have $565,000 worth of expenses, including this HVAC system? In other words, do we really need to start looking for new money when we can't even spend the money we have?
I don't think there's any problem with the spending money, in this town. We do a pretty good job. we're gonna find a way to spend that money. I just think we should be talking about how we're gonna spend the money. Whether we're gonna spend it on infrastructure, we're gonna spend it on staff, we're gonna spend it on other things. There's plenty of uses for money. And Becky would tell you that there's a lot of categories that are supported by this program. And we gotta decide how we're gonna spend it. I mean, as a town, so.
Yeah, I thought we looked over the list and we all pretty much agreed, it was pretty restrictive. This HVAC definitely fits in it, but I thought we were kind of joking about, there's no way we're going to come up with this many projects enough projects at this dollar amount that will fit the requirements of, that will fit the criteria for spending this money.
Just the heating and ventilation systems are gonna total something close to $500,000. I mean, like,
Seriously.
let's say
In
400.
elementary school?
Yeah, I mean, we could spend that money easily and have a state-of-the-art system. If that's supported by a subsidy, that's a super deal.
Of
It would really
course.
improve the building.
It's that much. I didn't realize it was that much.
Well, I think
thought
that,
the numbers were
I think
very
what we funded last year was 170 for the HVAC control upgrade.
It
which
was
included the
200.
engineering. So that's a minor thing compared to a whole building ventilation system, which requires quite a bit more work and equipment. So I'm just taking a guess that it's going to cost at least a couple hundred for a whole building ventilation system. That could be integrated into those same controls, though. We discussed that with the engineer.
Susie, is your hand up or is that?
Yep,
from-
it
Yep.
is. I think you also have to remember that there have been a lot of projects going on and a lot of projects that take a lot of work to get going. If there is a whole building ventilation project in our future, I feel like it's appropriate for us to finish some of the things that are right in our lap, and some of the ARPA funds are going to go that way. But I think it's not how to go about an even bigger project like whole building ventilation. Maybe that is, a discussion for not just the FinCom. It's really not just the FinCom. So that piece, the fact that it hasn't gone forward doesn't surprise me while we're dealing with roofs and culverts and HVAC controls and a number of other things.
The
Okay,
culvert and the HVAC are all underway. They're completely in train. Those are in train.
And they took work to get there.
Yeah, so let's get working on the next one.
Okay, any other committee reports? Is it personnel? Have anything
Well,
new?
Becky already, we met last night, but Becky had already mentioned to you that we're looking over, basically what we did was we have a classification system that helps determine the level of responsibility a job has, if you will, and where it fits in the pay scales and what grade level that position should be in. And we found there was one position that was on our list of market alignment adjustments that was just, we brought it closer to, if not up to, the average in Franklin County, but compared to the person's peers in town hall, they're getting paid way lower. So we'll talk about that in the next meeting.
Yeah, that's one of the 2 items for our next
Right.
meeting agenda.
Right. So that's really all we've talked about.
Okay. Is anything new school wise or? Mute.
Nope, not at the school.
Okay. Capital, is capital met since or anything new on the
no.
capital
Come
side?
to the finance committee next.
Yeah. Okay, I think have we covered all the committees?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else we need to discuss tonight?
Celtics?
Well, but losing Rob was a killer, but still.
Yeah, it
looking good.
was. It was. Maybe he'll be back soon.
Yeah, the next 3 games are tough.
It's hard to
Well,
say
I'll
that
make a
who
motion-
knows
I'll make a
who's going to
motion,
play in those games.
Yeah, they're gonna be good.
I think the rest of the
Memphis won't.
season's gonna be good.
Memphis won't be playing anybody. They're already locked in.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
And do we really want the #1 seed? I'm not sure we do. I don't know.
It's a weird year.
Yeah.
It's going to the playoffs.
Don't forget to document that, AJ.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second,
Second.
All right. George?
have a nice eye.
Artier, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, eye.
Mosier, aye.
Walton, aye. So we'll see you all next Thursday at 7 o'clock, a week from this coming Thursday, 7. All
Sounds good.
Bruno.
right.
Thank
a good
you
night.
all.
You all have a
See you.
good one.